Welcome to Books the Biz, the show where real-world business meets real-world results. Hosted by business strategist Dan Paulson and veteran CFO Richard Beltry, this podcast breaks down the stories, trends, and financial insights shaping today's companies. Dan brings decades of experience helping leaders simplify operations, build strong cultures, and scale with confidence. Rich adds his deep financial expertise from guiding organizations across healthcare, construction, logistics, and professional services. Together, they dig into what's really happening behind the numbers and what it means for owners, executives, and anyone trying to grow a stronger, smarter business. This is practical conversation, real talk, and tools you can use right now. Welcome to Books the Biz.
Hello and welcome to Books the Biz. Happy afternoon. Rich, how are you doing this week?
I am doing well, Dan. How are you?
I am doing good. Staying warm. How about you?
Yeah, it's a heat wave here. It's 33.
It's about the same here, and it's going to be up in the 50s by this weekend. So we are enjoying that kind of weather here in Wisconsin. But we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about consultants and consulting. And this story kind of relates to a situation both you and I are dealing with a client. It's a client we both have. And I guess one thing we want to make clear is it's not that necessarily the consultant did anything bad or wrong, other than maybe picking the wrong size client for this opportunity. And, that's kind of the story here of we have to educate ourselves as customers. You've hired clients or consultants. I've hired consultants. Some do a great job. Others sometimes maybe not quite what you expect. So we're here to maybe give you a little bit of experience and then a little bit of advice on what you can do to protect yourself. But Rich, why don't you kind of share the story of what we've been dealing with and how we've been trying to help this client actually get the positive results that they were expecting from this opportunity?
Sure. So we have a client that was approached by a consultant for a tax rate reduction sort of project or a tax minimization project. You can call it whatever you want. It had to do with coming up with ways to, put in certain programs that would allow additional deductions that maybe weren't available to him under the structure that he was under at the time. So in doing so, he had to set up another entity and, it all sounded pretty legit. It seemed like by putting in another type of entity, you would allow certain things that were disallowed in the entity that he had before. So you could work, I'll call it your magic. You could work some magic to get some lower deductions. And it sounds great.
And it is legit. It is legal.
Legit. There was nothing illegitimate about it. There was nothing that was illegal about it. Or, the problem that I think that we ran into was the fact that, was it practical for the size entity that he is? There's things that don't necessarily make sense because the effort is too big to get the result that you're basically being offered. This person is now an owner of a company that has to run around and make sure that he collects every receipt for every Subway meal that he goes to because he wants to qualify the fact that it was bought at a certain time of the day and it was within the certain parameters of the program that gives him the additional deduction for the meal because it was a certain type of requirement. Well, number one, how often are you going to Subway?
Right.
You have to remember to take that picture of that receipt or hold on to it. You have to give it to the bookkeeper and specifically say it has to be a certain way. The bookkeeper then has to manage this. Now, I'm out of breath already just dealing with one Subway receipt, right? And
Yep.
so you start to feel the fact that that practicality is going out the window. Okay. Then you start to add, Augusta rules, which we could talk about later if you wanted to. There's not a lot of time on this podcast,
Actually, I
but
believe if you want to dig back into some past episodes, I believe we did touch on the
I think we
Augusta rule.
touched,
Yep.
yeah, I think we've touched on that type of stuff before. But the overriding factors when I meet with people about tax type projects, I'm basically saying to them, you can't buy a tax deduction. If you spend $100 on something, you're only getting $37 back, and that's if you're in the top tax bracket. So you're not really buying a tax deduction. So all these guys that run out and buy, as we've always talked about, the guys that are starting a business and they go out and they buy the F-350 dually, and a trailer and all new equipment, and then they say, I don't have any clients. So now you have to pay for all that. The government gives you 37% back, but you didn't have any clients. So honestly, you didn't get anything because the tax deduction at that point is zero. Okay. So now you have a big bill for an F-350 and a trailer. I think that there comes some practicality for, in our case, trying to tell this person that we were consulting that, let's make this as mechanical as possible. Let's make it as reasonable as possible so you're not chasing that subway receipt.
Yeah.
And I think in our case, we've pretty much done that, but we still keep kind of running into these little things that pop out that practicality became, we have to do that much more administrative work, or we have to do that much more. I mean, to pay for an extra tax return because you now have another entity.
Yep.
You're paying the bookkeeper more because she's got to spend more time to actually track what you're asking her to track. So
Yep.
when you start adding it up, you're paying a lot. So at the end of the day, you're getting the tax benefit that you were offered, but you're paying for it.
Yeah.
That's where I struggle because you're laying out the cash and it looks like you're getting a tax deduction, but you have less cash in your pocket.
Yeah. And that's where I think some of the challenges come in, whether it be this situation or whatnot. If you've never hired a consultant before, you might not know what questions to ask. If you don't have another resource to even bounce ideas off of, that's an issue. Now, in this particular situation, this was actually a client, or is actually a client of mine, and he didn't notify me that he had been contacted by this other consultant and that he had already signed up for the deal. So I found out after the fact, which is then when you got brought into the whole equation, because he was already getting pushback from his current accounting firm that didn't understand the program. So they were dragging their feet. And I also don't think they had the resources to implement the program because they were already behind on getting his tax reporting. Again, see another podcast video where we talk about that challenge when you're trying to run a business. It just put us in a situation where we're already behind the eight ball and trying to correct something that this individual made a pretty significant investment on without clearly understanding what was all involved in it or how it would impact his business. Because I think, again, the process itself makes sense if you are a certain size business and you already have some of that complexity in place because you already have the systems to support. In this case, the business was a little bit smaller and it now created all this extra overhead that needed to be done. So you look at what he saves in one hand and what he's spending in the other, and it's not like for like, or it's not a significant benefit to him that way. It's almost like it's a wash in some cases. We hope, I think, with the work that you're doing and with what the bookkeeper's been doing, I think we're going to see some benefit there. But how long are we going to get across that break even and into the plus side? That's really been the question, I think, for both of us as we've been working through this process with him. But, he's not the only situation. And you've had bad clients. I've had bad clients. I think we can both say sometimes, again, we even misread the room and maybe picked up somebody that wasn't a good fit for us. Maybe our clients had different expectations than what we were able to provide. So this is why we're not trying to slam the consultants per se, but it's really coming down to understanding what you're getting into and what that scope of work is going to be and what's going to be expected of you on that. Because I'm even going through the experience right now with certain prospect as I'm talking with them and trying to explain, here's what I'm going to offer, here's what you need to do. And there's kind of this, I won't call it misunderstanding yet, but maybe a misaligned expectation where they're assuming that, well, you're not here enough time, you need to be here more time to implement some of the things that you're talking about. And I'm trying to explain to them, well, that's not how this works. If we want to keep the investment at a level where we're going to see the return, the ultimate way we're doing this is we're working through your team to implement the processes and procedures that are going to make you the most benefit. And that's where you're going to see the greatest growth. And I believe even from your side, on the financial, the CFO side of things, you pretty much do the same thing for the most part, don't you?
I would say 100% we do the same thing. When I'm working with a client as sort of the CFO, because I tend to be in a lot of different places, so I wear a lot of different hats. When I'm wearing that CFO hat, I'm being critical of the CPA or the other consultant that's coming in and saying, here's what I'm going to save you, and here's what I'm going to do. And I, do the same thing that everybody else does. I scratch my head and say, okay, how? The how is the big key. How are you going to do that? And a lot of times somebody has a really good, innovative idea, then we explore it. But if you're just telling me that I'm going to spend more money and it's going to put more, tax deduction in front of me, I get very queasy. I start to really worry about what are you putting in front of me. I think another example from sort of the tax accounting side, people running to me and saying, hey, guess what? We're going to get you the R&D credit.
Yeah. And
it's happened a lot in the last week. So that's why it's fresh in my head. So I apologize if I off script a little there. But, the R&D credit has one thing that you absolutely have to do, which is you need I think they use the word contemporaneous documentation. You need to make sure that you've put everything in place that says why you're eligible for the credit. And I've had at least one client where we sat down and started to think about it. And we said, you know what? You're doing specific work for someone else. They're paying you to do design of, say, a computer program that's going to give them the analysis that's going to improve something. Well, you're just doing the design, okay? The innovation isn't with you. The innovation is with the person who hired you. So it's not necessarily your credit, it's their credit. So you have to be careful, okay? And the problem that I have is now everybody out there is offering to do your R&D credit, okay? I happen to know that there are a couple of payroll services that are offering to do your R&D credit calculation. And I'm saying, who's interviewing you to understand exactly what it is you're doing, or are they just making an assumption and now your entire documentation is based on an assumption? So again, if you don't understand it, ask. Talk to everybody you need to talk to get enough information, okay? And that way you can make an informed decision on whether or not you should take this, because credits are different than deductions. Credits are dollar for dollar. The government is basically getting involved with you to do that R&D. Okay. And if it's not legit, they're not going to be happy.
Yeah. And I would say the only good news about that is usually the R&D credits are after you've already filed your taxes, at least in my experience. Now, maybe some of them are doing on the front end as you're filing your tax for that year. The consultants I've worked with on that typically will say, you file your taxes, and then we're going to go back and we're going to ask for those credits on last year's taxes. If they haven't done it before, they can go back, I believe, up to 3 years. And I have seen good success with that with the right companies. But you're correct. You have to have the documentation. You have to have somebody who knows what they're doing and isn't just going to pencil whip a form and send it in, and then possibly put you in an audit situation, which, by the way, if you've never been in one, you probably don't want to find out what one is like. Let's just put it that way, because it's never fun. They're going to ask for a lot of information. If you're not careful, they will dig up other stuff and find different ways to penalize or fine you, and that's never a good situation. And I'm sure you can bring up even more examples of where that's happened, because that's more your world. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot of consultants out there. I don't know how many people you get approached by on an average day or week, but usually if I look at my inbox, almost at least once a day, I'm getting a pitch for some sort of service that's going to save me money, make me money, get me more clients, whatever it might be. And as you've mentioned, it really is buyer beware. You have to be informed. You have to educate yourself. I strongly encourage that. We talked in the last session, and I thought you brought this up. This was a great idea. You need a board of advisors. You need somebody or a group of people, a small group of people, not 50, like 2 or 3, that you can bounce ideas off of that will give you real world feedback and not just be a yes person for you, or just nod their head and agree with everything that you're trying to do. Find people who are actually going to push back on you and challenge whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, or whatever it is the consultant is bringing in and telling you they're going to save you or make you, because I believe other people see things through a different lens than you do as an owner, especially if you're in a situation where you're looking to increase the number of clients, or you're looking to save money, or you're looking to decrease your taxes. We kind of get lost in that filter or the excitement of that potential gain versus, what is going to cost us. And it can put us in a really bad situation. How about you?
Yeah, I do go back to last week. I do agree with that. The board of advisors, I think, needs to be, you need to have your, I'll call it your circle of friends, right?
Yes.
But you need the true friends, the ones that will tell you the real answer, not somebody who's going to yes you to death. In the case of this, if someone had come to us and asked us about that, original client we were talking about, I have a feeling there might have been a little bit of more pushback of how is this really going to work? Tell us a little bit more, because, in a way, for this to really be a win, he has to grow probably at a higher rate than he was already growing before, because his tax rate right now is too low. That's where he's sitting there saying, I'm not really getting the result that I expected. Yeah. But if the assumption was on that 37% rate and they were able to get him down to 25, that's a win. But he wasn't at the 37% rate. He was probably at the 20% rate. And now with all the extra expenses, he's down to 10. So now, in order to benefit from all the things he's put in place, he probably has to try to get back up to the 25 or 37% rate. I know I'm talking technical, but that's how it works. It's a rate game. The whole concept of the consulting was on getting your rate down, but his rate was already down, or the additional expenses put him in a place where he was already down. So, if that's the case, I would have been sitting there saying, well, how are you assuming on the rate? What are you assuming his rate is right now? What are you assuming once you turn around and say you're flooding some of this through a C Corp and it's only going to be at 21%? But if it's already below 21%, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, and the other side of this is, how much do you have to spend to get up to where you now put yourself in that higher tax bracket, which means if you're spending that money, that's already, in most cases, creating a deduction for you that is probably going to be greater than the whole consultant and the whole restructure of the deal. So that's another thing you have to consider. And that's why, again, it's important to have somebody else look at this maybe from a different perspective, where they have a different level of experience than you do, because we're all experts in our own field. But when we're hiring somebody as a consultant, typically they're an expert in something we're not. Because if we could do it, we would already be doing it. That's the reason we bring in somebody else to backfill those gaps. And if you're going to make that investment, then you have to make some wise choices on it. You have to have somebody that understands what you don't, to avoid additional costs that you're not going to be happy to incur.
True.
Yeah. Rich, if somebody needs an advisor or needs somebody to bounce ideas off of from a financial side, I always recommend you, which is why I bring you into a lot of different deals. How do they get a hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of me is by email, rich@xcxo.net.
And if you have some operational needs, you're trying to figure out how to make people more efficient or deal with process improvement, then you can contact me. Similar email, dan@xcxo.net. Rich, great discussion as always, and we will talk to you next week.
Sounds good. See you then.
Thanks for listening to Books and the Biz. If today's conversation sparked new ideas for your company, the team at XCXO can help you turn those ideas into action. XCXO brings together seasoned executives, fractional CEOs, COOs, CFOs, and CXOs who step into your business with the experience, strategy, and leadership to drive real results. Whether you're trying to scale, strengthen operations, improve profitability, or prepare for transition, our experts help you move faster and lead with confidence. To learn more or start a conversation, visit xcxo.net. That's xcxo.net, your shortcut to stronger leadership and a better run business. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time on Books and the Biz.